She screamed, "I need space. Go stay at a hotel for a month so I can breathe." I replied, "I'll do better than that." I went to the leasing office, paid the fee to break my half of the lease, and moved out permanently. When the landlord knocked on her door, demanding the full rent she couldn't afford. Posted this on another sub, but they said it belonged here. Background: me, 28M. Been with Caroline, 27F, for about 2 years. We moved in together 8 months ago in this decent apartment downtown. Split everything 50-50, which seemed fair since we both work. I'm in warehouse management. She does something with social media for small businesses. Now, Caroline's always been a bit dramatic. Not crazy dramatic, but like everything's either amazing or terrible with her. No middle ground. At first, I thought it was cute, but after living together, it got old fast. Every small problem became this huge crisis that needed immediate attention. The apartment thing was her idea. She found this place online and was obsessed with it. 2-bedroom, nice area, but definitely pricey. I told her it was pushing our budget, but she really wanted it. Said we could make it work if we were careful with spending. Famous last words. First few months were okay. We had the usual adjustment stuff, learning to live together. She leaves dishes everywhere. I'm apparently too loud in the mornings. Whatever, normal couple stuff. But then her spending started getting out of control. Caroline has this thing where she needs to buy stuff when she's stressed. New clothes, makeup, home decor, random kitchen gadgets she'll never use. I'm talking like $400 shopping trips twice a week. When I brought it up, she said I was being controlling and that she worked hard for her money. Fine, whatever. But then she started hinting that I should cover more of the rent and utilities since I made slightly more than her. Not a lot more, but enough that she thought it was unfair we split everything equally. I told her we agreed on 50-50 when we moved in, and that wasn't changing. That's when the real problem started. She began doing this thing where she'd create drama right before rent was due. Suddenly, we'd be fighting about something stupid and she'd be too upset to deal with money stuff. Guess who ended up paying the full rent 3 months in a row while she sorted out her feelings? Yeah, I know I should have put a stop to it earlier, but I figured it was temporary stress from work. She kept saying things would settle down once she got her client situation figured out. Spoiler alert, they never did. Last month was the breaking point. She came home with like 6 bags from Target talking about how she needed new bedding and curtains to feel comfortable in our space. Spent almost $300 on stuff we didn't need. This was 2 days before rent was due. I asked her where her half of the rent money was and she got defensive. Said she'd been working extra hard lately and deserved to treat herself. Then she hit me with this look like I was supposed to just handle it because I'm the man or something. Not happening. I told her she needed to return the stuff and get her money back for rent. She flipped out saying I was being unsupportive and controlling her spending. We had this huge fight where she accused me of trying to change her and not accepting who she was. The whole thing was exhausting. She ended up putting her half on a credit card, which stressed her out even more. Then she was mad at me for making her go into debt. Like somehow it was my fault she spent rent money on garbage. Last week things got worse. Her job was stressing her out because apparently one of her clients was being difficult. Caroline deals with stress by making it everyone else's problem. She was picking fights about everything. How I loaded the dishwasher, where I put my shoes when I got home. The way I breathed too loud while she was watching TV. I tried being understanding at first, but it was getting ridiculous. Every conversation turned into an argument. She'd find something wrong with everything I did, then get mad when I pointed out she was being unreasonable. Last Tuesday, she had a total meltdown because I ate some leftovers that she was apparently saving for lunch. They'd been in the fridge for 4 days, and she hadn't mentioned anything about saving them. But somehow, I was supposed to read her mind. She screamed at me for 20 minutes about how I never consider her feelings and how living with me was suffocating her creativity over leftover Chinese food. That's when I started wondering if this relationship had run its course. Thursday was the final straw. She came home already in a bad mood because her client meeting went poorly. I was on the couch watching TV after work trying to relax. She walked in, slammed her purse down, and immediately started complaining about everything. The apartment was too messy, even though I'd cleaned that morning. I was watching TV too loud, even though it was barely audible. I hadn't asked about her day, even though she'd literally just walked in. Everything was my fault somehow. I tried to calm her down, but that made her angrier. She said I was dismissing her feelings and not taking her stress seriously. Then she started pacing around the living room, gesturing wildly, talking about how she couldn't handle this anymore. That's when she dropped the bomb. Said she needed space to figure things out. Not a breakup necessarily, but time apart to evaluate our relationship. She wanted me to stay at a hotel for a month while she had the apartment to herself. I just stared at her. A month in a hotel because she needed space. In the apartment I was paying half the rent for. You want me to pay for a hotel room for a month so you can have space in our apartment? I said, it's not about the money. It's about giving me room to breathe and think clearly. Where exactly am I supposed to get money for a hotel room while still paying my half of rent here? I don't know. Figure it out. Maybe you can stay with friends or something, right? So, I should either impose on friends for a month or blow through my savings paying for 2 places to live while she figured out her feelings in the apartment I was helping pay for. That's not happening, Caroline. Why are you being so difficult about this? I'm trying to save our relationship by kicking me out of my own place. It's not kicking you out. It's temporary space. If you cared about us, you'd understand. That's when I realized this whole thing was just another one of her manipulation tactics. Create a crisis, make unreasonable demands, then act like I was the problem when I said no. I was done playing these games. You know what? You're right. I said you do need space. Her face lit up like she'd won something. Really? You understand? Absolutely. In fact, I'll do you one better than a month. Before she could ask what I meant, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. She called after me asking where I was going, but I didn't answer. I had some business to take care of. First stop was the leasing office. It was almost closing time, but I made it with like 10 minutes to spare. Asked to speak with the property manager about breaking my lease early. The manager, Patricia, was pretty cool about it. Said it happens all the time with couples. There was an early termination fee of 2 months' rent for my portion, and I'd need to give 48 hours notice, but I could be off the lease by the end of the week if I wanted. I did the math in my head. 2 months of my half was $1,800. Way cheaper than a month in a hotel, plus continuing to pay rent for someone who wanted me gone. Plus, I'd be free of this whole toxic situation. Let's do it, I told Patricia. She printed out the paperwork and I signed everything. Paid the fee with my credit card and just like that, I was no longer rough bumble for that apartment. Patricia said she'd notify Caroline about the change in lease status within 24 hours. Next stop was my buddy Andrew's place. We've been friends since college, and he's always said I could crash at his place if I needed to. He's got a spare room that he mostly uses for storage. Anyway, Andrew took one look at my face and knew something was up. I explained the whole situation and asked if his offer still stood. He said absolutely and helped me make a plan to get my stuff out of the apartment. We decided to do it the next day while Caroline was at work. Get everything out clean and simple. No drama. Andrew even offered to help with his truck. I drove back to the apartment around 8. Caroline was in the kitchen making dinner, acting like everything was normal. She asked where I'd gone, and I told her I was handling the space situation like she wanted. She seemed satisfied with that answer and started talking about how good this was going to be for both of us, how she'd be able to focus on herself and figure out what she really wanted. I just nodded and went to bed. Friday morning, I waited until Caroline left for work, then called in sick to my job. Andrew showed up around 9 o'clock with his truck and we got to work. Most of my stuff was still in boxes anyway since we'd only been living together 8 months. Clothes, electronics, my furniture from before we moved in together, all the kitchen stuff that was actually mine. Took us about 3 hours to get everything packed up. I left my tea on the counter with a note. The note just said I was giving her all the space she wanted and that she'd be hearing from the leasing office soon about the lease situation. Nothing dramatic, just the facts. Andrew helped me get everything set up in his spare room. It's actually pretty nice, bigger than I expected, and he only wanted $300 a month for utilities and stuff. Way better deal than I was getting with Caroline. That evening, my phone started going crazy. Texts, calls, voicemails from Caroline asking what the hell I was doing and where all my stuff went. I didn't answer any of them. She wanted space. She was getting space. Saturday morning, Patricia from the leasing office called Caroline to inform her about the lease change. That's when the real panic started. Turns out Caroline had no idea how much the full rent actually was or what happens when someone breaks a lease early. The apartment was $1,800 a month. Caroline had been paying $900, thinking that was expensive. Now she was looking at the full amount, plus having to qualify for the lease on her own income. My phone was ringing non-stop. Caroline was freaking out, saying I couldn't just abandon her like this, that we needed to talk and figure things out like adults. Funny how she wanted to communicate now that there were actual consequences. I finally answered one of her calls Sunday evening. "What the hell did you do?" she screamed before I could even say hello. "I gave you the space you wanted. I meant temporary space, not you moving out completely and screwing me over. You said you needed time to think without me around. Problem solved. I can't afford this place on my own. You know that? Sounds like something you should have considered before demanding I leave." She started crying then. Said she didn't mean it like that and I was taking everything too literally. This was supposed to be about saving our relationship, not ending it. "Caroline, you told me to leave our apartment for a month so you could figure out your feelings. What exactly did you think was going to happen? I thought you'd stay with friends or something and we'd work through this." "Well, I paid rent on a place I wasn't allowed to live in. It was just going to be temporary." "Yeah, well, now it's permanent. You got exactly what you asked for." She begged me to come back and fix the lease situation. Said she'd learned her lesson and we could work things out, but I was done. This wasn't the first time she'd created some crisis to get her way, and it wouldn't be the last. I told her I was moving on and hung up. Blocked her number and all her social media accounts. Time to close this chapter. Monday morning, Andrew told me he'd run into Patricia at the grocery store. Apparently, Caroline had been to the leasing office trying to get me added back to the lease. Patricia had explained that I'd legally terminated my responsibility and couldn't be forced back on without signing new paperwork. Andrew said Patricia mentioned that Caroline had also tried to break her portion of the lease, but couldn't afford the early termination fee. She was stuck paying full rent until the lease ended in 4 months or finding someone to take over. Andrew said Patricia had mentioned that getting a roommate was complicated because the lease was in both our names originally. Adding someone new would require credit checks and approval from the landlord. Plus, most people don't want to jump into a 4-month lease with a stranger. Caroline could try to sublease Ace, but she'd still be responsible if the subletter didn't pay. Tuesday, Caroline showed up at Andrew's place. I wasn't home, but Andrew said she seemed pretty desperate. She'd left a letter asking me to call her and fix this mess. The letter went straight into the trash. By Wednesday, reality was setting in for her. She'd have to pay full rent on Friday, and her bank account couldn't handle it. Her credit cards were already maxed from her shopping habits, and she didn't qualify for any loans. Thursday, she tried calling from different numbers, hoping I'd pick up. When that didn't work, she got one of her friends to call, pretending it was an emergency. I recognized the friend's voice and hung up immediately. Friday came and went. Andrew heard from a mutual friend that Caroline had managed to scrape together enough for rent, but just barely. She'd apparently borrowed money from her parents and was not happy about having to explain the situation to them. The following week, Caroline tried reaching out through mutual friends. They all got the same story about how I'd abandoned her in a crisis and left her financially screwed. Most of them knew Caroline well enough to see through the manipulation, but a couple thought I was being harsh. I didn't really care what people thought. I knew the truth, and so did the people who mattered. Caroline had created this situation by demanding something unreasonable, then getting mad when there were consequences. Andrew said he'd heard through the grapevine that Caroline was struggling to make ends meet. She'd cut back on her shopping and was actually cooking at home instead of ordering takeout every night. Apparently, having to pay full rent was a real wake-up call. 3 weeks later, I heard she'd found someone to sublease Ace my old room. Some girl from her work who needed a place short-term. But the subletter had rules about cleanliness and splitting expenses that Caroline wasn't used to dealing with. Last I heard, the subletting situation wasn't working out great. Caroline wasn't used to having someone call her out on her mess and spending habits. Turns out, when you're not in a relationship with someone, they're less likely to enable your bad behavior. Meanwhile, I'm doing great at Andrew's place. We've known each other for years, so living together is easy. No drama, no walking on eggshells, no fighting about stupid stuff. I can actually relax when I get home from work. I've been saving money too. Even with helping Andrew with his mortgage, my monthly expenses are way lower than they were with Caroline. Turns out not subsidizing someone else's shopping addiction is good for the bank account. Best part is the peace and quiet. No more manufactured crisis. No more fights about nothing. No more feeling like I have to manage someone else's emotions all the time. Just normal adult life without the constant chaos. Looking back, the whole thing was a blessing in disguise. Caroline did me a huge favor by showing me exactly who she was and what living with her long-term would look like. Better to find out after 8 months than 8 years. She wanted space to figure out what she wanted. Turns out what she wanted was someone to subsidize her lifestyle while putting up with her drama. When that option disappeared, she had to face reality for the first time. Sometimes the best response to unreasonable demands is to give someone exactly what they asked for. Caroline learned that lesson the hard way. And I learned that I'm better off without someone who sees our relationship as a financial safety net. The apartment lease ends next month. Word is Caroline's planning to move back in with her parents since she can't afford a place on her own. Full circle, I guess. As for me, I'm thinking about getting my own place soon. Something smaller and cheaper where I can actually build up my savings instead of burning through them on someone else's bad decisions. Life's too short to spend it managing other people's manufactured drama. Sometimes you just gotta walk away and let them figure it out on their